Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rock Ag Podcast. This is Garrard, Coffey, Ag and Natural Resource Agent for the University of Kentucky in Rockcastle County. Today, we will be joined by Dr. Bob Coleman, University of Kentucky Equine Specialist. We will be talking about what your horse weighs, how to determine what your horse weighs, and why you should know what your horse weighs. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Bob.
Thanks, Garrett. Glad to be here.
So today, we are going to talk about what does my horse weigh. So that could be that could be a very in-depth discussion. We could talk about this. We can talk about it. I've seen people, go round and round, and I think mostly the big reason is that if I want to know what I weigh, I can run back here to a scale and jump on it, and I can tell you in about 30 seconds. With a horse, I'm going to say that most horse owners don't have a scale. So it's kind of a guessing game, that kind of thing. So the first thing I want to touch on with this is why do I need to know what my horse weighs? Why is that important?
Well, it's important, Garrett, for a lot of reasons. Certainly, what I do as an equine nutritionist, or when I'm building feeding programs, I need to know how much the horse weighs so I can, number one, estimate what he requires, and then I can calculate what we need to feed him. So that's a big thing. When we go with dewormers, typically we deworm at a rate relative to how much the horse weighs. So we need to know how much he weighs so that we treat him with the appropriate amount. Any of the medications that we have, again, are probably delivered based on so much of the medication per unit of body weight. And so, and again, we want to know whether it's feeding, deworming, medications, we want to deliver what the horse needs in the appropriate amount. So we're not either over or under supplying, whether it's a medication or a feed. So that's kind of really important. I think the other thing is, in a lot of cases, it's good to know what your horse weighs so that you can evaluate what you're doing. Am I taking good care of my horse?
Right.
And in a lot of cases, we have horses that are probably weighing a little more than they should. And like us, that's not good for them.
Right.
By the same token, horses that are underweight, people are going to look over the fence and say, "Oh, you are not doing a good job," and that's also not good. Now, we might look at a horse and say, he's weighing what he should. Could he be a little heavier? Sure, but for what I'm doing with this horse, this is appropriate, and understanding that is really good. And we'll there's sort of two things that we can do that'll help horse owners to take care of business. But basically, it's really gives us an idea of how we can manage our horses, and that's why we need to know what he weighs.
I think a lot of dewormers that I have purchased, they treat a 1,200-pound horse, and I'm sure that there are a lot of 1,200-pound horses out there, according to the dewormer that they've been given.
Absolutely, and maybe that's some of the reasons why we've got horses that aren't being dewormed very well. But you're exactly right. And just think about it, if it's close, so if we're 100 pounds out, that's probably not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But if we're 300 or 400 pounds out,
yeah,
and when you talk to horse owners, and ask them to tell you what their horse weighs and then put it on a scale.
Yeah.
I promise you that they'll be somewhere between 75 and 175 pounds inaccurate.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, even when people ask me to guess what their horses weigh, I'm pretty tentative to not do that because I know I'm not very good at it. I don't do it enough.
Yeah, it is a guess for sure.
We can go to the guy at the carnival and that guesses your weight and your occupation. Of course, that was probably 100 years ago. I mean, he gave away cheap prizes because he never wanted to guess your weight because he couldn't.
Right. So and this is a loaded question for you, I'm sure, but because there's so many different breeds and types. But if I go out to the pasture here after I get done talking to you, and I look and I go, well, they look all right, but what should my horse weigh? Where do I find out what my horse should weigh? I mean, do I call you and say, here's what I have, what should it weigh? Can I look that up online, or where would I find that information?
Well, actually, that didn't used to be available. In a lot of cases, we would look at horses and say, okay, he looks okay, but does he weigh what he should weigh? And there is actually something that people can buy. It's called the Healthy Horse app. It was actually generated between the University of Minnesota and the University of Kentucky. We have measured about 2,000 horses. And because of what you said earlier, well, there's all these different kind of horses. We've actually looked at, I believe there's 18 different breeds that have gone into the research and been poked and prodded and measured and put on scales and done all that sort of stuff to come up with, and we're used to hearing about algorithms in Facebook and everything else and Google. But we basically put it all into a computer. We compartmentalized it by breed and type. And so there is an app that's available on your phone that you can measure your horse, put the measurements into the phone, and it will calculate it, and it will give you an estimate for what the horse weighs today. And it'll also give you an estimate of what ideal body weight is. So it's very much like us going to the doctor's office and getting a BMI.
Very nice.
Is it deadly accurate? No. It's probably accurate. I think our error rate was about 35%. If you actually know, or your horse looks more like let's say if it's a thoroughbred, but it really looks like a quarter horse. It's built like a quarter horse. It looks like one of those sprinting quarter horses. I'd probably be very more likely to use the quarter horse calculation than I would the thoroughbred one.
Yeah.
By the same token, we had a quarter horse that was at a hunter show that we put it into the warm blood equation, and we were 7 pounds out.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
So I think you can buy it at, last I checked, it was $1.99. University of Kentucky doesn't get a penny from that. University of Minnesota doesn't get a penny from it. It's such a way, and if you look at the app, it actually shows you where to take the measurements.
Okay.
Now, if you don't have an iPhone or an Android, you can still go and get a heart girth tape, and they're okay. They're better than guessing. You have to use the heart girth tape the way that one was designed. Not all heart girth tapes are the same in the way that they were calibrated. And probably the biggest thing I see with heart girth tapes, in a lot of cases, they are not big enough. That you'll see they might go to 1,250 pounds. There's a few of the ones that are, you just go and buy them. They're not supplied by a feed company or a pharmaceutical company. They'll go up to about 325, which you think for most horses that should be big enough. But if there's anybody out there that's got warm bloods, they're going to be bigger than that. Yeah. And there's probably some quarter horses that are going to be bigger than that.
Oh yeah.
And so I like the app is a little better. But the heart girth tapes can work. And then the other one you can do is there are some body measurements. So you measure the length of the horse and his heart girth and put it into a formula that you can do this yourself. It's just the heart girth squared. So heart girth times heart girth, and then multiply that by the length and divide that by 330. And that will give you an estimate of body weight in pounds. Now the length is, you go from the point of the shoulder all the way around to the point of the buttock. So you actually do kind of have to go around and almost to the tail. It's not the same as measuring for a blanket.
Yeah.
A lot of people will do that, but then they get it too long. But again, that that gives you something that you can do. You need a good long tape measure. So not to sell tape measures for anybody, but go buy the yellow or the pink ones at Walmart in the sewing section,
Yeah.
and get the 120-inch ones, because that'll give you more than enough that you can use that tape. They work really well. I carry one with me all the time because I need it if I'm going to use the app.
Yeah.
But I think there's some ways that we can do that, and it just gives you a measure, and you could do it, every quarter of the year and say, yeah, I'm doing all right. And in a lot of cases, knowing what your horse weighs, that the good news is for you, because you can go back and say, I measured him at Christmas time, and I measured him at Easter, and then I measured him on the 4th of July, and my measurements say that he's within 25 pounds
Yeah.
every time.
Yeah.
That would tell me that you're doing a really good job of caring for your horse. You're managing his feed, you're managing his exercise. Now, if he is 300 pounds overweight, well, then you're not doing a good job, but at least you're consistent.
Right. So on that subject is that I think that you just hit on it, is that, maybe for myself is, I'm here at home. I've got some horses that I'm going to be doing some trail riding. I am going to be, using them maybe in some sorting pens with some cattle, maybe a couple of things like that. And probably, I've got a general idea of what they weigh, but the body condition score of that horse is probably going to be as important as what it weighs. Because like you said, you don't want the 300-pound overweight horse, and you don't want the 300-pound underweight horse for sure. So, determining that body condition score and how we get to that point, and, keeping that body condition score consistent. I may not ride near as much from Christmas to Easter as I do from Easter to the 4th of July. So, making sure that body condition score is staying consistent is important, I think.
It is. And body condition score, one of the things that people need to realize, it's a pretty simple system, but it basically measures stored body fat. That's what it does. It doesn't measure physical fitness. It's just stored body fat. And the system that we generally use goes from 1, which is extremely thin, to 9, which is obese. And our ideal, or where we would want to be, or what I would recommend to the situation you just described about riding, in that I would like my horse to be somewhere between a 4 and a 6.
Yeah.
Physiologically, that gives him enough calories, and he's not carrying too much extra fat. That horse should do really well. If I was knowing I was going to do a lot of riding, I probably would like to start my riding season a little closer to a 6 than a 4, because if I lose anything, I've got room to lose.
Right.
So that's really good. But I look at body condition score, and certainly some horses, it's like people, will carry body fat in different places. We're not all built the same. Our horses aren't. But there's around their neck, about midway between their pole and their withers, is a good place to check. It's kind of the last place on most horses that they will store fat, but it can certainly be a lot there. So we're going to want to check that, see how much fat is there. Then we go down and check over their withers. So some of those horses that are really high withered horses, there's still fat beside that. And so you can check, and you want to see, can I actually feel those vertebrae, and how easy can I? Then I look over behind the shoulder, and there's a fat deposit that will form there. It's kind of a loose fat deposit. I sort of say it's kind of like Santa Claus. It wiggles like a bowl full of jelly. The bigger it is, the more it jiggles. Then across their rib cage, and I typically sort of stand at their shoulder, and I'll look at the point of their hip, and I run my hands right straight towards the point of the hip. So it's kind of in an upward trajectory. I do that because it puts me in the same place on every horse.
Yeah.
And the lower on the rib cage you go, the more likely you're to feel ribs. The higher you go, less likely. So you can, if you kind of go in the middle, I think you're going to hit a happy medium. Then I'm going to check down their back. I'd like their back to be flat. They can have a negative crease, which means their backbone is sticking up. And you can kind of run your fingers on either side. The lower their condition, the higher their backbone sticks up. Mm-hmm. Not great for a horse that we're riding. We have to pat them a lot then. Yeah. And then lastly, be over their tail head, and that'll also be a fairly spongy fat. So the easiest way to start, and there's some fact sheets through the College of Ag on is my horse too fat or my horse too thin are the two. And you can look at those, but I always start by looking at the horse. If I can see their ribs, even faintly, I know he's less than a 5. If I can't see any ribs, I know he's got to be a 5 or greater. And then I start there, and then I just start by palpating the 6 different places, and I adjust my score accordingly. So if there's no, I can't see the ribs, but I can feel them. Okay, still a 5. There's no fat behind his shoulder, still a 5. Yeah. I can feel his withers, still a 5. There's some fat, but I can feel him pretty good. He's flat down his back. There's not a negative crease or a positive crease. And a positive crease would be that he could probably hold water. So if we don't have that, we're good. Kind of smooth over his point of his croup. There's some fat there, but there's not excessive amounts. And then there's nothing on his neck. This horse hasn't changed. If he starts to get more or less, then I add or subtract. And so it's not uncommon that sometimes we'll have horses that are 5 over their ribs, and there's some of their breeds that like to keep a lot of fat, and they'll have a 8 neck. Yeah. It's like somebody stuffed a football in there. Yeah. And that's just the way it is. And so we have to take that into account. But looking at them and appreciating where the fat is, and it's kind of like you said on one of the other programs we did where, step back and look. Yeah. What do you see? Right. Well, same with this. Step back and look and be very discerning about where you're seeing fat deposits. And if you're not sure, then go palpate them. But again, there are those 2 fact sheets that are really helpful. It's not all that hard. If you follow the score sheet, we can all do this pretty good. I mean, I would be shocked that if you and I went and looked at a horse and followed the score sheet, that we wouldn't be within 1 score of what that horse was. Yeah. Everybody says, well, that's 1 score. If I'm scoring them a 5.5 and you score them a 6, that's close, and that's good enough for government work. Right. Now, if I score them an 8 and you score them a 3, well, we have done something outside the realm of following the scores. And so then we'd have to have a conversation, but that doesn't happen very often. Yeah. When we did that Healthy Horse app, as I said, we scored 2,000 horses. I didn't score them all, but I scored pretty close to about 1,600. And we might be a half a score out with the graduate students once we got going, but not further than that. Very good. Every now and then I might pull an extension specialist trick and call one a 7, even though it's a 5, just to make them argue.
Right. Just to make sure they're paying attention, right?
Exactly. And I think that's what you need to do. But it's a good system. Is it perfect? No, but it certainly is a useful tool, like the heart girth tapes, just to keep track of what's going on.
Okay. Well, that is, I think that's pretty well got us where we need to be. Any last words for us before we go?
I think we're good. Hope everybody enjoys their horses.
Yeah, absolutely. Get out there and ride. Enjoy your horses. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. The contact information will be as follows. Dr. Bob, thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to doing more in the future.
You bet. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Ag Podcast. For more information on the topic today, please contact Garrard Coffey at the Rockcastle County Extension Office at the contact information above.